All right, you've seen this slide before, but just to remind you, we're all kind to each other here. And please do, as we go, ask questions in Slack is the best place for them. Not only because that's where the in-kind program coordinators are focusing their attention, but it's also, you can continue to use it to ask questions throughout the rest of the week. So we'll try and keep an eye on the Zoom chat as well, but Slack is really better. So hopefully you've got the link there from the session page and so on. You can join that Slack channel. You can also put your hand up as well, and we'll try and catch those as well. But Slack is mainly where we're going to be looking. All right, so I have 3 goals for you today. One is to make sure you know who the Rubin In-kind program coordination team is. I think we have most, if not all of them here. We'll also do a quick update on the development of the LSST data rights agreements, which is one of our sort of high-level objectives for this program, is to get those settled and signed away. And I'm hoping we'll spend most of our workshop time doing a walkthrough of the manual for in-kind contributors and recipients, which is a document we just put out recently explaining how to go about making or receiving a Rubin LSST in-kind contribution. We'll assume that you've read parts of it as contributors and recipients, but not all of it, and that you have questions. So we'll spend most of the time on that. If you're neither a recipient nor a contributor, I hope you find this session interesting. You may well brush into this program at some point. That's good to know what's going on. Okay, so the IPC team is here to help make the in-kind contribution successful. We have a team of 4 IPCs in the Rubin Operations Director's Office. I think they're all here. If you could just flick on your videos to make sure. And let's see, Steve Ridgway, do you want to say hi?
Hi, with the scientist with NOIRLab.
Very good, thanks. And Steve specializes in telescope time and dataset contributions. Knut, do you want to say hi?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Knut Olsen. I'm also at NOIRLab, specializing in IDACs and computing resources, as it says.
There we go, thanks Knut. And then I see Aprajita, you've made it. Staying up late.
Yeah, I'm Aprajita. I'm in Oxford and I specialize in software contribution.
Great, thank you. And also working with Aprajita is Greg Medeski. Are you there, Greg?
Yes, I'm here. I'm at Slack and I will work primarily on software contributions and also the interaction with software science collaborations.
All right, thanks all. So everyone involved with the in-kind program, you'll be running into at least one of these IPCs at some point. And that's because each contribution now has an assigned IPC to help with interactions mainly between the contribution lead and the recipient group. And I'll explain more about what those actors do and are responsible for in a second. The IPCs also have assigned to them international programs, and their role is to assist the program manager for that program in making sure everything gets done. So some new terminology for you in blue here. Let's see. Okay, so let me give you a few slides of update on the data rights agreement and progress towards them. Just as a recap, we received a lot of proposals last fall from in-kind program teams. We went through the review with the Contribution Evaluation Committee. That review led to a number of modifications, which are mostly all processed now, and a small handful of postponements and rejections. We took the modified program to the management board in April, and they approved it without further changes, which is great. What that means is that DOE, SLAC, and AURA, the 2 managing organizations and one of our funding agencies, they are now each developing a data rights agreement template, including a common set of terms and conditions, such that we can get the first agreements to be out there presented to the programs in the fall. And we expect the more complicated, difficult ones might take through the winter as well, but with the first ones, we think we'll be able to get out this fall. So that's good. Data rights agreements are becoming a real thing. Also, as a result of the approval of that program, and also because of the long-standing June 30th deadline that we've all had in mind, we at Rubin are now managing the data rights holder database. We took over that from LSSTC on July 1st. What that means is that all inquiries you have about data rights should now be sent to us here at Rubin. And in particular, Heather Shaughnessy is managing the data rights holder database. So program managers will be hearing from Heather if they haven't already. Why are they hearing from it? Well, the program managers are getting requests from us to update their data rights holder lists, the list of people holding the PI and JA slots. And those requests will come using the PI quotas based on your in-kind proposal programs. So the program manager is the person responsible for maintaining their programs lists of PIs and JAs. So if you're out there in the audience what the status of your data rights is, your program manager should be able to tell you. The definition of what a PI and a JA is now clarified a bit better in the Rubin data policy. Take a look at section 4.3. There's a link here in the slides. Basically, the rule of thumb is that PIs have the means to raise funds and support in-kind contributions, whereas JAs don't. So postdocs and grad students are typical JAs, tenured faculty are typical PIs, and then we will figure out the people in the grey area as we go, but that's the logic. The PIs have the means to support in-kind contributions. Also note that junior associates no longer need to belong to a PI at their institution. So the program teams can pool their resources and spread the JAs around. We just ask that each junior associate has a mentor in their program to make sure that they're well connected within the LSST. Okay, so what will the data rights agreements look like? So programs, the type of DRA you get will depend on the types of contribution you make. So there are going to be 3 types of data rights agreement, one from each of the signing organizations. Where DOE already has a science and technology agreement with your funding agency, they may implement a Rubin DRA as a so-called project annex. I think we'll only do this in a small number of cases. Most data rights agreements will be developed and signed by either SLAC or AURA as the 2 managing organizations. And which one does it depends on what's in your program. Just some examples, telescope time will all be administered by NOIRLab. And so that will need to come under an AURA data rights agreement. Self-development contributions in the LSST desk, for example, would be an example of SLAC scope. And so that would lead to a SLAC agreement. And then we'll figure out the less clear-cut contributions as we go. And the SLAC and AURA legal staff are working on streamlining this as much as they can. Okay, so while I think each of these data rights agreements should be in the end straightforward, there's some startup work to do getting these terms and conditions right, and then there'll be 40 or more, likely more, data rights agreements for us to establish, and so we're going to be working on these through the next winter. However, in-kind contributions, you can start them with confidence, I think. The statement of work in each one will refer to the start dates such that all contributions are correctly credited. So if your contributions start before the data rights agreement is signed, you still get credit for that, data rights credit for that work. And in fact, many contribution teams have already begun planning work along with their recipient groups, which is great. I don't think we need to wait. We can be confident that the data rights agreements will get set up okay. I'm going to pause here for a minute to see if there's any questions coming up in Slack before we switch gears and talk about the process of actually making or receiving one of these contributions. What are you seeing, IPCs?
Yeah, there was a question on Slack. I think it came in as the session started from Nacho Sevilla Nuarbe concerning in-kind contributions from international teams to commissioning, which I think you might be the right person to address. Is it expected that they will start roughly with the same timeline as the Chile-US announcement of opportunity, or will they be treated on a case-by-case basis?
I think they'll probably be, they'll need to start at about the same time, because what the sitcom team is doing is trying to put together a coherently managed team that all works together to get the thing done. And so the schedule for those in-kind contributions will line up with the schedule for the US and Chilean contributions. So in practice, what I'll do is put those in-kind teams contributing to commissioning in touch directly with sitcom leadership, and then they can work out the schedule and how things are going to work.
There's a
Is
question
there any questions about data rights agreements, Knut, before we
yes, yeah. So this next one, if a country has 5 different in-kind contributions, this is from Renee Lozek. If a country has 5 different in-kind contributions to different science collaborations, will they have 5 different agreements to sign?
No, it's not quite that bad. There may be 2 agreements instead of just 1, if the scope is sort of both Aura side and Slack side. But the agreement, the content would be much the same. And so it would hopefully be just a case of checking the terms and conditions once and then signing twice. But there would be at most 2 data rights agreement per program.
And one more from Luis de Costa on DRAs. So which agency will sign the IDAC data rights agreements?
I think that is Slack scope, just because of the needed connections to the US Data Access Center, which is a DOE funded Slack managed thing. And the decision about where the scope goes is really up to the managing organizations. They're the ones that are going to say, you know, we need to sign this agreement because it relates to stuff that is going to be managed, that we're going to be responsible for managing. So I can make good guesses at how things are going to come out, but they'll have the final say.
There are more questions coming in, but they're not on DRA. So maybe if you want to keep going, and then we could come back to those.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, and Knut, can you, if I don't pause on purpose, maybe you can jump in and suggest a timeout to do questions when you see a good time.
Sounds good.
Thanks. All right, so let's talk about how to make and receive in-kind contributions. Remember, we did something similar to this last year. We talked through the handbook for proposal teams. Now we've moved on from a handbook to a manual, but we'll do a similar kind of walkthrough and try and cover as many of your questions as we can. Okay, so here's what the front page of the manual looks like. Its telephone number is RDO41. So there's the link, but if you remember the number, then it's easy to get to the PDF in DocuShare. The goal is to help you, the contribution leads, program managers, and recipients, work together to make each in-kind contribution succeed. This is a living document. We're open to improvements anytime. Best way to do that is to use the feedback form that is linked from the introduction of this document. It's a very simple Google form. It's like one paragraph. Tell us how to make it better. A good place to start looking at this manual is not the introduction, turns out. A good thing to do is to go to the back of the manual and look for the brightly colored checklists. And those are the things that when you find the one that works for you, so for example, the contribution leads, your one is green, this will lead you through step by step what you need to do and when and who you need to do it with. And then if you have questions about any of that, you can then go look up in the rest of the manual for more details. So yeah, take a look at Appendix B for the brightly colored checklists. For the contribution leads, in a nutshell, what you're going to be doing is driving the planning of the work, managing your contribution team so they get the work done, and be responsible for reporting regularly on your progress. In order to succeed at this, you're going to need to communicate with your recipient group really well. You probably figured this out already just from working with them this far. The recipient directory is in Appendix A in case you're not in touch with them. Why is communication so important? It's because the embedding of contributions is critical to their success by definition. The contribution lead is the person responsible for ensuring that their team act as good citizens in the recipient group, do the things that you signed up to do, and work well with others. And so that means being both communicative and open to collaboration. So recipients, we want them to be able to focus on technical direction for these contributions to make sure that the in-kind contributions really do meet Rubin and the LSST science community's needs. And so we're trying to take as much of the logistical burden off of them to give them space and time to think hard and work with the contribution leads on the technical nature of the contribution. Recipients will have multiple opportunities to give feedback on reporting that's led by the contribution leads. So look for the teal checklist in Appendix B. Recipients are basically the group for which the contribution was designed and which the contribution and the contributing team is embedded. These are typically either LSST science collaborations or working groups within collaborations. They can be Rubin Observatory teams, or they can be Rubin's operating partners. So NOIRLab, for example, is the recipient of much of the telescope time and data set contributions. Primary recipients are the ones responsible for the technical direction and tracking of the work, and it's their feedback that carries most weight. However, a number of contributions do have secondary recipients as well, who will have a role to play in the evaluation and the technical direction. Okay, last checklist. This is a blue one for program managers. What do program managers do? They support their contribution leads and they work with their assigned IPC to track progress and solve problems. They're the kind of hens looking after the contribution lead chicks. Look for the blue checklist in Appendix B. Their main responsibility is for ensuring that all the contributions within their program are on track and that the relevant reporting has been completed and submitted on time. Go through that in a slide or two's time. They're also responsible for maintaining the list of data rights holders covered by their program. And so they're the ones responding to Heather in the next few weeks about who the PIs and who the JAs are in your program. What this means is that PMs, you will need to either be or become well known to your community. Hopefully, I think most of you already are. And if you get replaced, you'll need to introduce them well. Let's see. I might pause there in case there are questions about the checklists or the different roles. Do you see anything, Knut?
Yeah, there are. There's a number of questions about timelines, which are referred to in the checklist. So maybe we could take some of those. From Renee Lozek again. If the start of science operations is delayed, should the contributions from groups to specific science collaborations that need early science support, such as solar science or TVS, also be delayed from FY22 to e.g. FY23 or 24?
So this is something that I think we're going to have to work out on a contribution by contribution basis. So some contributions can be safely delayed so that they're, for example, timed well to the start of the survey. And so, telescope time might fall into that category. Other types of contribution might benefit from starting as planned, just because then they can make more use of the time before the survey starts. So building science infrastructure in science collaborations, for example, might be good to get that started early in order to allow more time for before the data starts flowing. So I think we'll have to figure out the timeline for each contribution on a contribution by contribution basis. In practice, that means the contribution lead and the recipient figuring it out together. That answer the question?
I think so. That's good. We have another one. Working plan in-kind contributions was made in fall 2020, spring 2021, without taking into the consideration the 16 months delay. planning to offer computer resources. As the DR1 and start of the full operation is considerably delayed, rescheduling of the working plan should be made. Can you explain how you plan to proceed with that issue? So I guess this is more about replanning.
Yeah, so I mean, to add a bit more to what I just said, I think what our role will be is to facilitate that conversation between the contributor and the recipient to figure out the replanning, and there'll be a number of factors involved. Not only when is the contribution going to be best timed given the delayed schedule, but also when are the resources available, and when do they have to be used. Some contributions can be delayed, some can't, and so the ones that can't, we'll need to figure out how to make best use of. And so that might be especially important when it comes to the software development effort. If there are people available now that can't be delayed till later, then we'll need to work to try and make use of the delay time.
Here's one about the specific timelines in the checklist. So what happens when the T0 minus 3 to 4 months has already passed? There are ongoing contributions discussions which may not be exactly able to follow all the timelines as listed, since this document came in a bit late. So I guess this is concerning programs that are starting soon. Yeah.
So there, it's sort of it's a bit like trying to merge into traffic, right? The time is coming past, and you have to figure out how to jump in and make use of the flow. So the big milestone, I think, is really the first annual evaluation, and you'll see in a few slides that's planned for next fall 22. And so before then, there is time for work planning and quarterly updates on the way to that annual evaluation. And so even for contributions that have already started, it should be possible to figure out between the contribution lead and the recipient in the IPC when the first quarterly update should take place, such that we're all ready for the first annual evaluation next year. So there are some contributions that have already begun, and I think with some reference to the manual and some careful thought, it should be possible to figure out how to begin the process of doing updates and so on. I'm sure some of it has already been done already, right? There'll be work plans in place that it'll be straightforward to turn into things that fit in our system.
Do you have a couple more questions? But Aprajita also has her hand raised, so maybe she should jump in here.
I just wanted to add that don't worry if you haven't met the 3 to 4 month timeline, and the IPCs will be helping you get started. So as Phil mentioned, there's definitely time to do stuff, and we'll work with you to kick off those work plans. So I think that's the next thing on our list of to-dos. Sorry for the alarms in the background. So yeah, we'll be contacting those teams that have FY22 starts in the next week to make sure that you're connected with your recipient groups.
Yeah, maybe 1 or 2 more quick questions from Alma Gonzalez. Could you clarify the role of the point of contact when it's not the same as the contribution lead? This came up in the checklist.
Yeah. I'll say something, and then Aprajita can jump in and correct and add. I think the idea with the point of contact was to enable, if there's somebody who's better suited to working with the recipient to take the technical direction that's needed and work that into the planning, then it's possible for the contribution lead to designate someone to do that. So the contribution lead is, we need someone who is sort of overall responsible for the contribution and will make sure that the progress is tracked correctly. But in some cases, it may be that person is not the right one to be working directly with the recipient to hear what's really needed and make it happen. What do you think, Aprajita? What would you add?
Yeah, I think you summarized it well. So it was at the point of proposals, contribution leads could designate someone else. And you can always do that if you feel the contact should be through someone else rather than the lead.
And just my last question on Zoom, and before moving on, from Massimo D'Allora, how is it managed when the recipients are more than one single science collaboration?
Good. So there's always a primary recipient who would be the one that we would look to first for both technical direction and evaluation of the reports coming from the contribution. But there are cases where, as you say, multiple science collaborations or multiple recipient groups are somehow receiving the contribution, which is to say they have needs that must be met by the contribution. I think in the manual we go through how those secondary recipients are involved in the evaluation process, and the contribution IPC will have more of a role, I think, in making sure that all of the recipients are involved in that evaluation and are having some say in the technical direction. In some cases, I can imagine that an efficient thing to do will be to just get everybody together at various points during the year in order to check on the work plan and make sure things are going the way everyone expects.
Yeah, there's more questions, but I think they'll naturally come up as you keep going. So. All
right, let's keep going then. Okay, so those checklists were in the appendix at the back. I said that there'll be details in those checklists that you'll want to check up on, and the place to check up on them is the rest of the manual. So section 2 of the manual is where the bulk of the material about work planning and evaluation of contributions in the annual evaluation is described there. Quarterly updates on the way to that annual evaluation are described there as well. And this section is designed to be generic, applicable to all contributions. Then in sections 3 to 6, there are there's sort of additional notes on specific types of contribution. So there's a section on scope time and data sets, there's one on IDACs, there's one on software development effort, and then one on contributions to Rubin Operations and commissioning. And this is where you get the specific rather than general guidelines to look up in. Okay. Okay, so let's talk through the steps of planning evaluation, what's involved. So all contributions have an initial work plan, which is then evolved in a series of quarterly updates. So this allows for something like rolling wave planning. The experience with these kind of contributions where they have already been made around the science collaborations or in Rubin is that you need some mechanism for adapting the plan as you go, perhaps not surprisingly. So the required contents of the work plan is described in the manual for each type. So look in sections 3 to 6 for information on that. The initial summary of the work plan is developed in consultation with the recipients. And this is the thing that needs to be agreed upon 1 to 2 months prior to the scheduled start. That work plan summary and the plan for the first quarter needs to be approved by the program manager and the IPC before it starts, just to make sure everything's looking well set up. And then at each quarterly update, one of the main things that will happen in that quarterly update is planning for the next 3 months. And so adapting to circumstances, seeing what's needed, working with the recipients to figure out what the contributions teams are going to do next. So that means that the initial work plan shouldn't be too onerous. I mentioned annual evaluations, and the first one starting in fall of 2022. After that, there'll be one of these every year in the fall is the plan. Here's how it works. The contribution leads, you'll prepare a self-report following a simple form. And then recipients, you'll get to review those in a simple performance evaluation. Hopefully this will not take very much of your time. The IPC will then, the IPC team will then put together annual performance evaluation report for the whole in-kind program, and they'll consult the standing CEC, Contribution Evaluation Committee, as needed. And one of the things that report will do is come up with any proposed amendments to the contribution statement of work. We're hoping that amendments will be rare, but we can imagine situations where we'll have to change the statement of work in the data rights agreement. So that annual report will be presented to the Rubin Resource Board by Bob, the Operations Director. And that Resource Board will actually it'll be more of a forum, I think. It'll be for the representatives of the funding agencies to hear about progress of the in-kind program, and if there are changes to be made, they probably won't hear about them for the first time then, but they'll have a chance to discuss them and work together to solve problems and so on. So that should all happen in the winter after the fall review, with amendments being implemented mid-December, something like that. But from your point of view, most of the activity will happen in the early fall when you're doing these self-reports and review of those self-reports. Okay, I might pause there again before getting into the specifics for the different types of contribution. Do you see questions about this stuff, Luke?
No questions about this. I think there are questions about the specific programs. I think maybe given time, we should jump into that.
Specific programs or specific types of contribution?
Sorry, specific types of contributions. Maybe. Okay, so one question here from Seth Digel. So an annual plan is needed only for the first year, right?
So the initial work plan is, you can think of it as being a set of high-level goals for the contribution, and so actually would cover longer than the first year. It would more or less define the whole contribution, though of course things can change. And then accompanying that set of high-level goals would be a plan for the first 3 months of work. That's what the initial work plan would look like. Then at the quarterly update is when the second quarter's work would be planned, and any changes to the overall summary could be introduced then, and then we keep going from there on. And then after a year's worth of work is when we would do the first annual evaluation. So the contribution lead would fill out the report and the recipients would review.
Yeah. Okay. I don't see any more questions on that particular topic.
All right, good.
Mm-hmm.
I see. I was listening to my father-in-law when we were on holiday a few weeks ago. He was telling me how he quit one of his jobs because the quarterly and annual reporting got so bad that he was spending all of his time preparing for quarterly reports and annual reports. And no matter what he reported, whether it was poor performance or good performance, he always got criticized by management because either he was planning poorly or he wasn't performing. Okay, so the annual and quarterly reports for the in-kind program will not be like that. The system is designed to help you plan good contributions and help them succeed over time. And so this should not be an onerous thing. It should be a useful thing for all involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Good.
So let's talk about some specific types of contribution. Let's start with software development effort. And so this needs to be embedded in the recipient group, according to the manual. For more than a year now, we've been talking about different types of software development effort: directable, non-directable, and general pool. So let's look at what's needed for these three different types. So for directable software development effort, we're looking for the contribution team, the developers, to work closely with the recipient group, basically join the recipient group and work to fulfill the group's needs in whatever area they need them met. So maintaining close contact with the group, basically becoming members of the group. For non-directable software development, this is, if if you recall, this is where the team has signed up to deliver a package that the group needs, as opposed to taking week by week functional direction from the recipient group. However, the contribution leads for these types of non-directable software development contributions are still going to need to plan work with the recipients and then present and report progress to them. So what might this look like? It might look like them coming to a working group meeting from time to time, showing what progress has been made on the package, and spending some time with the recipient group talking about progress and new directions and so on, so that when the team come to do their next quarterly update, they can include that feedback in their plan and make sure that the package that they are working on, that they did sign up to build, is actually going to meet the group's needs, the recipient's needs. The third type of software development effort is the so-called general pool. This is where directable effort has been offered up, but without any named recipient. So this is software development effort that is available to be deployed by Rubin where it's needed. And typically these are software professionals or scientists with a wide range of skills across the pool. And so we're fairly excited about going through that and finding good placements for these contributions to be made, either in Rubin Observatory or in one or more of the science collaborations. We'll be working on this after the PCW. We'll run a very simple proposal process, looking for outstanding needs from around the LSST science community, and then work to make sensible assignments matching up skills and experience to the needs of the various groups. And so if you're out there in your recipient groups and you're aware of an unmet need, watch out for communications from Rubin about how to apply for general pooled software development effort in the coming weeks. Once assigned, then these developers would basically become directable effort contributions.
Do you want to pause here and look at software questions?
Let's do this last slide, and then we'll talk software.
Yeah. Okay.
So other things of interest in the manual for software development effort contributions. One of the early things that the contribution team will need to do is work on requirements for the software they're going to build. And so you'll see in the manual that contribution leads are responsible for developing an initial set of technical requirements based on goals set for them by the recipients. There's discussion in the manual about user stories, which is a good way of getting high-level information from the recipient group about what they need, so that the developer team can then figure out the requirements and then work to them. So we suggest a process for doing that in the manual. Contribution teams should be aware that this in-kind contributed software should meet some basic standards, both for quality of code and how that code is written. We derived a set of guidelines in the manual from various sources around the Rubin community in order to come up with a set of standards that sort of matches our existing aspirations for what Rubin LSST code should look like. Basically, we're asking for software to be developed collaboratively in a shared version control repository that the recipient has access to, recipients have access to. This should allow good feedback for the code development process. That code should be validated and clearly documented, and will need to be released publicly at the point of delivery of the final version to the recipients, if not before. So we're after a collaborative coding model to make sure that the code that's produced really does meet recipients' needs. And you can check the manual out for detailed information about standards and so on. And it's the contribution leads that are responsible for making sure those standards are kept to. Thanks very much. Okay, Knut, we got time for some software questions. Yeah,
so there's a couple of questions, particularly about general pool software contributions. So Ramon Miquel asks, when should we be able to start a general pool software contribution? I guess maybe Ramon is asking from the in-kind contributor standpoint, but or from the recipient standpoint.
Yeah. So there are some programs that have general pool software development effort available this year. So we will be working this summer to get that those first contributions started. There are other programs that will be providing general pooled effort later on, and the profile of available effort actually extends into the survey. So we should be able to keep meeting various recipients' needs through till a couple of years into the survey, I think. So it's not all coming in one at the start, it's spread out a little bit. But the first ones should be able to start this fall.
Okay, then Renee Lozek had a couple of questions. One of them, Aprajita, is answered in chat, I think. The other one, so how far in advance will the recipient of the general pool contribution be made known to help plan the hiring of people who will provide these contributions?
Yeah, so for one starting this year, the people are already there. So it's a question more of matching existing skills and experience with immediate needs. For programs that need to make hires to provide this kind of development effort, we'll work with them to try and match them up with recipient groups in time, such that when their new person comes online, they can then start work. And the opportunity there is for the intended recipient to get to work with the contribution team to make sure that the job ad makes sense.
Okay, I don't see other software specific questions, so
okay,
could move on. Yep.
And time check. We've got 15 minutes left, I think. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so telescope time and dataset contributions. Each one of them has its own character, as Steve has been finding out. And so really the high level guidance is for contributors and recipients, just work with Steve and NOIRLab to make these work. They're all different in their own way. For telescope time contributions, we'll need, if we don't know already, we'll need to understand the facilities offered, the amount of availability, the deliverables, related support activities, and so on. A lot of this was in the proposals already, but this is the kind of information that Steve and NOIRLab are going to need. The scheduling is going to have to be synchronized with the NOIRLab TAC process. So Steve's been spinning up the NOIRLab TAC team in order to prepare for this. He will need a facility liaison who will work with a NOIRLab contact to make sure that the opportunities are announced on time and the telescope time is planned. I guess that facility liaison in some cases will be the contribution lead, perhaps not all. So this could be another case where a point of contact is appropriate. For dataset contributions, we're going to need to know the planned host and storage requirements. Again, we know some of this from the proposals, but not all. Steve will also be asking for schedules for when the data sets are updated and so on. And the data set will need to come with documentation, and so that will need to be planned. So these are some of the elements for the work plans that we'll need for these types of contributions.
Yeah. So we have a telescope specific question that relates to that sort of upcoming timeline. So David Buckley asks, regarding telescope time contributions and section 3.6 on AON, it states that the AON implementation plans are subject to review by AON and NOIRLab and approval by the Rubin CEC. Teams should provide no later than September 2021 a schedule for a conceptual design review and a preliminary design review. The latter should include a timeline for completion and a plan for functional testing. Is the 1st of September 2021 still the deadline for this?
Steve.
Yeah, David, thank you for calling that up. We don't have any reason to change that. You're making it a little harder on yourself by making it 1 September rather than just September. That gives you an idea of whether there's clearly some flexibility here. But we do need to move ahead on that. If you would like to request a change, a shift, that may be reasonable depending on when the start of the facility access is scheduled. Of course, we originally assumed that that would be approximately at the time of the start of Rubin Ops. Now that's been shifted. That will be then true of some telescope in-kind contributions and perhaps not all. So I think at this time, it's best to look at the telescope facilities each as an individual case. And so please let us know what your situation is on that planning. And if September is not a good deadline for you, let's discuss what you would like to have. And that would go for other facilities also.
Yeah. So to summarize, I think one could take the deadline to mean September 30th, and also if an extension is needed or makes sense because of when the facility would start, they should get in touch with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Tim Dinas asks, where are these data sets being hosted, USDF or simply available from somewhere? So I think this was required to be put in the in-kind proposal where the data set would be hosted. So they have identified either often NOIRLab as the recipient or an IDAC that is linked with that particular proposal. So I don't think there's any expectation that the data set be made available at the US data facility. Okay, there are no more telescope and data set questions. There is another software question, but maybe we should move on and then take up the remaining questions with time.
Yeah, that sounds good. And of course, we will be answering questions in the Slack channel all week. So if a question occurs to you even after we finished here, then just drop it in there anytime. Okay, so IDACs, independent data access centers, have a bit of time to get ready. But discussion and planning should begin now. So there's some notes here for what we're going to need to be included in the initial work plan. So all of you contribution teams have been working to the technical checklist in RTN 003. We'll need to know, and it will be helpful for you to write down any development you need to meet those requirements. That will include plans for installation of the hardware, plans for data transfer and ingestion, what kind of testing you're going to need to do in pre-operations, what user support tasks you anticipate, and what kind of interaction you're planning with the IDAC coordination group. That coordination group is a forum for IDAC providers. Hopefully you've been in contact with it already. And we're looking for it to be a place where the contribution teams can share notes and solve problems together. And so Knut encourages you to come to the IDAC's breakout session on Thursday for more discussion. He's going to be running a nice session there. And overall, the goal there is to make it easy for users to connect to the IDACs that suit them, and again, work together to get there. Are you seeing any questions about IDACs? I see Frosty has a hand up.
Yeah, so Phil, just to clarify, in project, by the way, hi, I'm Frosty, I work for Rubin Observatory, so hence the context of my question. In project, we're still being advised that we can still make changes to RTN 003, and it has not been finalized, right? Is that still correct?
So it was used as a reference during the proposal period by the IDAC team. So I would say that any changes that we make to it, we just need to work them through with the IDAC groups so that they can respond to those changes. Okay,
because we've been just invited to make some additional edits to RTN 003. So just wanted to make sure that, you know, it's worthwhile and you're not going to say it too late. Okay. All right, thank you.
That's fine. I think I'm sure the IDAC contribution teams are expecting you know, things to evolve over time. I think the main thing is to get the changes out there into the coordination group so that we can all figure out together how to respond to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and since this, Tim Dines had some follow-ups on his data set question, which I think is related to IDAC. So, yeah, Tim, do you want to unmute and just make this point?
Yeah, no, yeah. So I was mainly saying that, of course, making them available using simple image access or something is great, it's fine. But there are many additional benefits you could have if they were integrated into the butler that we have on the LSST Rubin system, because then you can do integrated pipeline processing and things like that using the user batch system, and so that there are some fairly incredible benefits you can get from doing that. But of course, that requires some data engineering work from the contributing team, because there are certain things you have to do to prepare the data sets to make them amenable in the data model. So for HSC, we've done all that ourselves, and for CFHD and things like that. But if a new data set, it turns up, there's a little bit of work needed, but obviously, whether people want this is entirely up to the project, I guess. But from my point of view, as the person who wrote the butler or led the butler development, obviously I would love it if these external data sets were available to all users in the data facility.
Yeah, understood. I mean, I think we'll end up with certainly some of the contributed data sets being available from the US Data Access Center. The other thing to say is that ideally the network of IDACs will end up like you know, a series of miniature versions of the US DAC. I know that some of the IDACs are looking to run the Rubin Science platform. I don't know how many of them are currently looking at adopting the butler for serving data, but there's definitely possibilities there as well. So I think for dataset contribution teams, you should you know, listen to what Tim said and think about your plans for where your data set is going to end up. Is it a possibility to help get it butlerized and federated more closely with the LSST data? I think it's a good opportunity, and we'll have to figure out where the best place for it to go and how to get it there. Oh, Frosty has a hand up again.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to will actually, Tim, but just to say that at least some of the RSP services do actually depend on the butler. So if you wanted somehow to run the RSP without the butler, you would have to do some development.
Right. Thank you. Okay, I think we're close to the end of our slide deck, which is good because we're close to the end of our time. Here's just a few notes on programs that have contributions to Rubin commissioning and operations. So high level, what does it mean to contribute to these teams? It means more or less joining the team and then following the rules. So the contribution leads, you'll be the point of contact for the relevant Rubin team leader, either in commissioning or in operations. And you'll be expected to manage your contribution team. So you'll be the main contact for that, for the team lead. In most cases, I think the whole contribution team will be onboarded as Rubin staff and then expected to follow same procedures and policies. I think there'll be some exceptions, but that'll probably be the norm. For commissioning members, international in-kind SITCOM members, you all have the same rights and responsibilities as US and Chilean team members who joined via the recent AO. So you'll see in the manual there's explicit reference to that AO, and we've pulled out the most relevant pieces for you as well. And the idea is that the SITCOM team is trying to make a single coherent team of scientists and engineers from a variety of sources, both in the US and Chile and also internationally. One difference, though, is that the US and Chilean folks will not undergo the same annual performance evaluation. And that's basically because their data rights don't depend on it. But again, this shouldn't be onerous and should actually be helpful to you when planning work and checking that things are going well. Okay, last bit on process for making and receiving contributions. What about amendments to existing contributions and ideas for new ones? So right now we're focused on getting the initial program going, but it will be possible to make changes. Once a year in spring, the IPC team will review suggestions for changes to contributions or ideas for new ones. Why would this ever happen? Well, program circumstances might change, perhaps to do with their funding situation. Some changes might be needed as a result of the annual performance evaluation. And so what the IPC team will do is maintain a running list of suggestions, proposals from all sides, and then process them all at the same time in the spring. And they'll present changes to the ops director, Bob, and then he'll call on the CEC for advice on what to do with them. So spring for amendments and new contributions, fall for annual review. And so here's a picture of what the rest of 21 and 22 will look like. Let's look at 22 first. That's the orange one on the right. In green, that's the period for considering changes to contributions. That's when the IPC team will be looking at that. Purple down there in September is the period for contribution leads to be evaluating their own progress and recipients reviewing it. And then before the purple box, there's a sequence of 3 pink boxes going back in time, which are the quarterly updates. So that will be reporting on progress the previous 3 months and planning work for the next 3 months. Okay, so that's a more or less typical year, 2022, we hope. In 2021, it looks a little different. There you see in pink the first quarterly update in December. We'll actually use the fall period, September through November, to do some cleanup from the proposal process. We have a number of, a couple of programs and then a few more programs with some additional contributions that were either postponed or had to be revised after the last round of review. So we and Rubin will be looking at those with the CEC this fall. And then fall 22 is when the first annual performance evaluation will take place. So this slide is in the deck, along with all the other slides. You can stare at it at your leisure. We'll probably put a version of this picture into the manual as well as we continue to update and improve it based on your feedback. And just a reminder, we are hearing from you anytime. If you see something that's missing or if you have a question that isn't answered by the manual, you can put it in the feedback form and we'll address it. This week, you can use the Slack channel based around this session to ask more questions. I think we are just about out of time. Is there anything burning in the Slack channel, Knut, that we should answer before we go?
Well, this is maybe a good last question to end on. What is the likely timeline for being advised of final PI value for programs?
That's happening right now. So some programs have had their final PI quota advised to them, and they're busy filling out their data rights holder lists of names. We'll be processing the rest in the next few weeks. So by the end of the summer, all of you will have received an update request.
And would you anticipate any changes to that value between now and the data rights agreement approval process, or the DRA process really is just signing off on the recommended PI values?
Yeah, my fond hope is that the recommended PI values will survive into the DRAs. There could be problems either from the program side if there's some legality that can't be met, I think it's unlikely at this point that the US agencies would veto anything or look to make any changes, but we can't rule it out. So we were confident enough, or we are confident enough in the current PI quotas to ask you for actual names of people. And so that's how confident we are that those numbers will persist through into the data rights agreement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are more questions coming into Slack, but should we perhaps try to answer them offline?
Yeah, let's head over to the Slack channel and we'll type out answers to the rest of them and give everyone else a break, go and have a cup of tea, enjoy the rest of your day, and be ready for the day of PCW tomorrow.
Okay.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Really good to see you all.